You know that feeling of home? What makes a place truly feel like yours? It's something we all get, but for millions of immigrants all over the world, that feeling is part of a much bigger journey, one that we can actually track with data.
And that's really the core question, isn't it? When does a new place stop being just a place you live and start feeling like home? Is it after a certain number of years? Is it the friends you make? Or is it about the passport you carry?
Well, for the people who study this, it's way more than just a fuzzy feeling. It's a really complex, trackable process. It's about how a person's identity literally shifts and adapts when they're in a new country.
And that's exactly what we're going to get into. We're going to move past the anecdotes and look at the hard data, and it reveals some pretty surprising patterns about what it really means to belong.
Okay, first we've got to understand this key difference. On one hand, you have simple attachment. Think of this as just liking a place. You feel an emotional connection. But then there's national identification, and this goes so much deeper. This is about feeling like you are a part of that nation. It's baked into who you are. And it's right here, in the gap between these two ideas, that things get really interesting.
So how is this whole process supposed to work? Let's start with a classic theory, which actually suggests a pretty predictable pattern.
The basic idea is really straightforward. With every new generation, a family's roots in their new country get deeper, and naturally, the connection to the old country starts to fade a bit.
And yeah, the data for the first generation, the people who actually made the move, pretty much backs this up. They almost always feel a stronger tie to the country they came from. Which makes sense, right? It's the place that shaped them.
But now look what happens with their kids. By the second generation, you often see what's called an identity flip. The connection to the country where they were born and grew up becomes way stronger than their connection to their parents' homeland.
But is it always that neat and tidy? A simple handoff from one generation to the next? Well, as researchers started to dig a little deeper, they found that this straightforward story gets complicated, fast.
It turns out that which generation you are is just one piece of a much bigger puzzle. There are other really powerful factors that can change the speed and sometimes even the entire direction of this journey.
Researchers have really zeroed in on a few key things. We're talking about stuff like religion, a person's social circle, and even age. All these things can have a huge effect on how someone's identity takes shape.
This chart is absolutely fascinating. It's comparing immigrants from the same country, Turkey, but from different religious backgrounds. Now focus on that second-generation column. The non-Muslim Turks feel significantly more European. But from Muslim Turks, even in the second generation, their connection to their ancestral home is still a bit stronger. This is a huge clue that religion plays a major role. And here is one of the most surprising findings in all of this. For adults, that generational shift we talked about generally holds true. But for immigrant teenagers, it's a whole different story. Research shows that for teens, their identification with the new country can actually stall out or even go in reverse as they get older.
So what is going on here? Well, the research points to a few things. It seems that teens who are more religious, who have fewer friends that were born in the country, or who live in more segregated neighborhoods tend to feel a weaker connection. It's also just an age where you become way more aware of being culturally different.
Now, something that's absolutely critical to remember is that this whole process doesn't happen in a bubble. The country an immigrant actually moves to plays a massive role in all of this. Let's take Britain as an example. Because of its history, the whole idea of being British has been seen as more of a civic thing, an imperial identity. It was seen as more open to people no matter their religion or ethnicity, which is different from a more ethnic-based identity, like being English. And you can see that playing out in the data right here. When you give them a choice, a majority of ethnic minorities in England say they identify as British. Meanwhile, a majority of the white population chooses English. It shows how immigrant groups are really embracing that bigger, more inclusive identity.
Over in France, researchers look at this through a slightly different lens. They call transnationalism. Now, that's just a fancy word for measuring how strong an immigrant's ties still are to their home country. Things like whether they own property back home, send money to family, or follow the politics there.
And this is just a wild case study. Researchers compared Muslim and Christian immigrants from Senegal, so they're the same ethnicity. And they asked a very profound question that really gets at where you feel you belong. Where do you wish to be buried? And the results were staggering. 77% of the Muslim Senegalese immigrants wanted to be buried in Africa, compared to just 44% of the Christian Senegalese.
And the data out of Germany tells a very similar story. Here, we can compare second-generation immigrants from the former Yugoslavia. Christians from that region score a 5.7 out of 10 on identifying with Germany. For Muslims from the same region, it's 4.0. And for Turkish Muslims, it's just a bit lower, at 3.7. You can see the patterns are incredibly consistent from country to country.
And this isn't just some abstract idea for a sociology paper. It has real-world effects on people's lives. Research in Germany found a direct link between national identity and personal well-being. A stronger identification with Germany was linked to a measurable increase in life satisfaction. To put it simply, feeling like you belong feels good.
So, after looking at all this data, what's the big picture here? What does all of this really mean for how we think about immigrant identity?
Well, it's crystal clear that the old, simple model of a straight line toward assimilation just isn't the full story. The reality is so much more dynamic. It's like a constant negotiation between an individual's background, their generation, their religion, their friends, and the culture of the nation they now call home.
And this really leaves us with a final thought. In a world that is more connected than ever, maybe the very definition of national identity is changing. Is it evolving from a single, exclusive label into something more fluid? Maybe it's about having one passport, but also having a lifetime of deep connections to other places you also call home.